Hello, and welcome to Enlightened Empaths, your community for the spiritually awakened. This week, we're going to be discussing the quarter life crisis and the empath. We've gotten a lot of emails and questions and stories from our younger listeners who wanted Denise and I to talk about what is it like to experience the decade of the 20s and early 30s when you're an empath in this generation that we're experiencing now. So Denise, you have children that are millennials right now. Have they been having effects of the quarter life crisis? Do you talk to them about the quarter life crisis? It sounds like such a strange term, doesn't it?
It does, and I didn't realize it was such a big thing. And as I mentioned in, I think, the last show, my older son made kind of a crack about it because he's my very linear, sequential, practical, grounded, mechanically inclined math science guy. And my younger son is right in the midst of this right now. But when I was reading about this, I didn't realize that this can impact like 86% of millennials. And it's usually that age frame from mid-20s into early 30s is a real flux time for a lot of people right now. So then, of course, I had to go back to thinking, okay, when I was in my mid-20s and early 30s, what was going on in my life? And it was a lot of the things that now we have a label for. Now we have a name for it. So I think it's something that's always been here, but now it's getting more intense. I really do. I think life is getting much more intense for this generation.
I do too, and I think it's a variety of factors that are influencing that. Primarily, I think it's the economy, and I'm going to talk about that. I've got some facts and statistics that I think will be illuminating. I also think it's the fact that childhood now is so structured. Mm-hmm. Everything every moment of a child's life tends to be structured, and we know as a kid what's going to happen every day and what the goal is for that year or even that decade. You go to elementary school, then you go to middle school, then you go to high school, then you choose if you go on to college or if you go into the workforce or join the armed forces. But up until 18, everything is laid out for you pretty clearly, and we all know what the goals are for each kid. And then you add to that this culture of everyone is wonderful, which I think has its place. I get that. Right. But I think it's difficult when you get an award just for showing up, or you get like what's one of the awards at my kids' school is perfect attendance, or just participation. Again, I think those are great. I think we need to boost kids' self-esteem. But I think it's difficult when they get out into the workforce and there is none of that. It's just more difficult. And so I think kids today are feeling a little lost and without a lifeboat once they get off into the real world. And then to add to that, there's this helicopter parenting that's been going on for a while where parents tend to micromanage their kids' schedules and help them navigate every decision of their life. And then they get out again into the workforce, and mom and dad aren't there to do that. When I was teaching at the college level, Denise, I always had to do drop ad. I'd have to sit behind a computer and meet the lines and lines of kids, done differently nowadays. But back then, kids would come to the gym during drop ad and they'd wait in line and they'd come up to my computer and they'd say, hey, I need to drop English 111 and add English 112. And I'd have to see if it was open and all of that. Mm-hmm. And I was always surprised that at least 80% of the students had a mom or dad with them. And the mom would come to me with her kid's schedule, Johnny needs to drop this and add this. And I would never really address the mom. I would always talk to the student because at that point they were 18, 19, 20, 21. They should know, did your parents ever go to drop ad with you? My parents dropped me off at college and were like, good luck to you.
Yeah, same scenario. I was first generation college, so I really had to figure it out fast, learn to navigate a very unfamiliar world. But it's interesting too when you're talking about this, and I know when we moved back from the West Coast and to Maine, and where my family of origin is, and my mother came to visit, and the kids were outside playing, and they'd take their bikes and they'd go here and they'd go there. And she said, we can't do that at home anymore. And I started thinking about this, of a real turning point was Columbine, and school used to be one of the safest places for kids to be, and you drop them off and they'd be okay. And when things started to shift, and I'm not going off on a tirade about violence and this and that, but parents started, again, the helicopter parenting started in a protective sort of way as well. It became this very fear-based thing that kids can't walk to school by themselves in certain areas because someone might grab them. And I know that's real and true, and it scares the hell out of me, and I hate it. I mean, there's no other way to put it, to live in that fear-based of a reality. But I think that it's also shifted the way we parent, shifted the way culturally. And again, for this generation, it's very, very different, because exactly what you just said, they didn't have that time to play outside till the street lights came on, or to, here, go downtown and call me when you want to come home. And for some kids, yes, but for a lot, no, they haven't had that sense of independence to figure some of the stuff out prior to becoming a young adult.
I think that's so true. Just last week in Colorado, a woman, she's a homeschooling mom. I don't know if you saw this in the news, Denise. And she lets her 8-year-old daughter walk their little dog down the street and back.
Yeah.
A neighbor called the police and said, there's a little girl walking her dog all alone.
Right.
The police came to the woman's house and reported her to DSS. And Social Services did a 2-week investigation into this poor mother. They interviewed her children, teachers, the pediatrician, and they finally found no fault. Yeah, because she walked her dog down the street.
Wow.
And I remember I was 9, 10 years old. We had a neighborhood pool. I'd go down there. My mom would pack me a lunch. I would spend the entire day at the pool with my friends. None of us had moms with us.
No.
We would take our bikes and we would cut through the woods and ride our bikes to the local drugstore. And it was the best thing. And we'd get Pop Rock candy and a really fancy marker. And that was that was it on a stick for me. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what I love more, spending my allowance on candy and cool markers, or just being able to ride my bike alone with my friends through the woods onto a street. We'd play flashlight tag till 10 p.m.
Yeah, there was freedom. There was freedom, and there were experiences that allowed you to develop a sense of self that might be more difficult in some ways. And you nailed it with the competitive, with the overstructuring. And I promise I'm not saying this to upset anyone or say if you're structuring your child's life, that's not a good thing, because I do. My kids took lessons. They were in sports. They played in bands. I mean, they did other things, but we also had downtime of, we'd just take an afternoon and go to the river and swim, or we'd go to a water park, or or they'd just go and play, and I would be doing something else. So I think the balance is, as everything, it's always about balance and choices. But for the topic that we're talking about, how do you learn those skills and regain that sense of self that you may not have had a strong foundation for if you haven't had any independence?
Yeah, that can be really hard, especially when you're an empath and suddenly there is no structure. There are no rules. You are just out on your own. You've got to figure this all out by yourself. The other thing I think that's difficult about the quarter life crisis is making friends.
Yes.
I remember when I got out of school and I was just working a job, I remember going, how do I make friends? Because, I was teaching at this school where most of the teachers were 15, 20 years older than I was. They'd been teaching there for years. They had their friends. They were in a different stage of life as well. And I remember thinking my whole life making friends has been easy because it's just people in your class, people in your dorm. And my sister said, well, take a yoga class. I bet you could meet a friend there. I was like, okay. So she and I started going to this yoga class at the rec center. And there was a young girl my age who had just graduated school as well. And my sister Courtney said, let's go get a drink at Blue Water on the beach and ask her to join us. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay. And I thought about it, and I walked over, and I just walked away, and I went back to my sister, and I said, it sounds like I'm asking her out on a date. Like, you know, I want to have a drink with my sister and me, and we can look at the ocean. It was so weird and creepy. I couldn't do it.
You're right. That's a great story. But one of the real things with this that, the more I read and the more I've talked to people and just watching patterns with folks I talk to and my own children as well, is for many, many people caught in this quarter life crisis, it's being bogged down with insecurities, disappointments, loneliness, depression, feeling like you're falling behind or that you haven't made your potential. You can have a lot of regrets. Oh, I wish I'd done this in high school or taken this class in college or tried out for this team or play. So it's a real time of intense soul searching and stress of like it. The picture in my head is a foot in both worlds, like where you've been and where you're trying to go, and you're straddling this line, and some days you're more in the past and some days you're trying to figure out the future, but almost immobilized to go in either direction.
Totally. And I think for the empath in particular, who has this need to please others and this need to live up to the expectations of those around us, in school that can be pretty easy. If you're an empath, I think school can be difficult for other reasons we've addressed on the show. But in terms of that need to please and help others, that's easy when you're in school. Oh, I'm going to be a good student, and my teacher will, like that I don't make waves in the classroom, and I can get good grades, and that'll please my parents. When you get out into the workforce, that can be a whole different ball of wax. And I think the empath in particular feels the strain of those expectations more deeply than the average person. This generation of millennials, they're often referred to as the boomerang generation because they tend to return home or delay adulthood by never leaving home in the first place. And I feel that this generation gets a really bad rap for that.
But
because
that goes into the economic stuff that you were talking about.
Exactly.
How different it is financially. Yes, we have a higher minimum wage. My boys laugh like hell when I tell them what I used to make for minimum wage. I mean, they have tears running down their face because it's like cartoon land. But also the cost of living was so different. But at the time, it was more matched. But where we are now with what the cost of living is and the expectations are, I mean, I live in a small town, and to get a one-bedroom apartment, you're looking at $700 or $800 a month. For a little small town in rural Maine. That's insane with what wages are.
That is. I know. Here, a one bedroom will run you $1,200 to $1,500.
Right. And that's either with or without utilities, but people aren't.
And everyone on the West Coast is laughing hysterically at us right now.
Yes. Or New York or Boston or even Portland, Maine. They're like, oh my God, 700, you poor thing. But there's not as much of a employment base either. You don't have as many options.
I've got some facts for us to help any boomerang millennials feel better.
Okay.
If they're still living at home, it'll make them feel better about the crappy economy. The average price of a new home 20 years ago was $175,000. That's adjusted for inflation. So that's $175,000 in today's money. Today, the average price of a home is $272,000.
Wow.
Now, yeah, which is crazy. Now, what's crazy is the median household income, when adjusted for inflation, has remained roughly the same for the last 20 years. So the cost of a house has doubled, but your income has basically remained the same.
Wow.
And that, I think, is pretty scary to think about. Now, in 1980, going back a little further, average college tuition was $2,400 a year. Today, it's $10,000 a year. So the kids have this weight of these student loans on them that just makes me crazy. In 1980, it is. The average cost of a car, when adjusted for inflation, was $22,000, while today it's $33,000. So millennials are having to put off adult rites of passage because they just don't have the money.
Right.
They will pay almost 40% more for their first house than the baby boomers did in the 1980s. But like we said, saving for that home can feel impossible when you're paying for rent, which is soaring. Rent prices have increased 46% in the last 40 years. And then they've got student loans. But check this out. Even the cost of entertainment has gone up. Are you ready for some mind-blowing facts?
Yes, I am.
In 1976, you could take your kids to see the Yankees for $5.50. That is $24 an hour, when adjusted for inflation. Today, those same tickets cost $245.
Wow.
And when I read that, I thought, that just pisses me off. When I was growing up, my parents would always take us to a Broadway show. At least once a year, we would go see a Broadway show. And I loved it. Those are some of my cherished memories. I took my kids to see Wicked, and it was over $1,000 for all of us to go.
Oh my goodness.
And that's a lot when you add in everything else that goes with, going into the city. Now,
Was
in the
that
1970s,
just the tickets?
yes, that was just the tickets. Yeah,
Oh my
that was
goodness.
just to see Wicked. Now, in the 1970s, you could go to the Super Bowl for $100 when adjusted for today's inflation. But in 2014, the average ticket would set you back $1,200.
And it's so skewed. That's the thing, because sometimes I'll see people, even in my area, because that's where I am, that's what I have for a base. They're younger, they may have 2 children, they're both working, not maybe above entry level jobs, but they're driving new cars, they have a big, beautiful home, they're taking trips, and I'm thinking, how are they affording to do that unless they're reliant on credit, or maybe they have support from a family or from something else, but a lot don't. And I can't figure out logistically how people can afford to live the lifestyle that they do based on the income that they have. And your point about people delaying adulting, as a lot of younger people like to say, is those rites of passage, like moving out, they'll almost rush into it, or they'll say, I have to get married, or I have to have children, or I have to, like they kind of jump in with both feet thinking that that's going to be the catalyst to make it all okay, and to feel like their lives are on the right track.
Right.
It's intense. It's so much, but it's from where I'm sitting as the mother of millennials, and also, having gone through different stages of my life, and I say this all the time and I apologize, it's different. It's very, very different. The rules, the expectations, the impact, the finances, but still a lot of people making the rules want it to be the same. They want it to still, that you have to follow this. I talked with this amazing, amazing young woman, and I won't break confidentiality. She's in a college program, very linear, sequential, and we were talking, and it was heavy and dense, and things were coming through in her reading. And then it shifted, and it came up what this young woman really loves, and the whole energy changed, and it was creative and color and light and art, and it was just amazing to hear the difference in this woman's voice. But the conversation and the reading was, how do I become that when I'm expected to do this? And I think that's a huge, huge pressure on millennials right now, of, as empaths, so many are creative, sensitive, aware. They're writers, they're painters, they're musicians, they're photographers, or they want to start their own business or be an entrepreneur or do something outside the box, but they're not having a base or the
A chance.
Thank you, or the support from people that they need, like that nudge to say, go for it, you can do this, you have this, you're changing the world.
Right. It's just all about paying off debt, paying off school loans. I feel like debt has become such an acceptable thing in our society. It kind of scares me. I remember when, my dad's goal was just to pay off the house. And now, my accountant tells me, don't ever pay off the house. That's the stupidest thing you could ever do with your money. It's like society is designed to keep you in debt. It feels that way to me. I have a really good friend. She is 56, and she put herself through college and grad school in her 20s. And we had lunch a couple of months ago. She's still paying off those student loans.
Right.
And she said, I'll probably be collecting Social Security and still paying these darn things off. I mean, that's such an albatross to wear around your neck.
Right.
It's just not fair. And then you add everything else to it. If you have children, the cost of childcare has drastically increased, which personally I think is a good thing. It's always troubled me that we pay someone millions of dollars to dribble a ball down a court, but we pay our childcare workers minimum wage. That it disturbs me. And then the cost of health insurance, and we don't even need to get into that. It's such a crazy mess. The average family plan right now is $6,000. I mean, it's just a lot of money. Everywhere you look, it's money, money, money. And everything seems like such a system set up to keep you down. I have a friend who just changed careers, and he's got the degree, he's got everything he needs. But for every job he's been applying for, it needs a different certification. And each certification requires a class that costs money. Then that requires a test that you have to pay for. It's like everywhere you turn,
Right.
it's something, boom, boom, boom. And so I think you're right. When you're an empath in your 20s and you're waking up and you're realizing, oh my gosh, I think I have all these special abilities. I think I can feel and sense and intuit things. And I really want to invest time in my spirit and my path and embrace my life and use my light to help others. But wait, I have to work 50 hours a week just to keep my head afloat. How am I going to still be a spiritual person?
Right. And
I think all of that can lead to feeling that lost sense that tends to define the quarter life crisis.
there was I did a little research, and there's a man, Robert McNaughton, who's the co-founder and CEO of the Integral Center in Boulder, Colorado. And the whole premise of this company that he started, it was, organizing and cutting edge of personal and relational development. But the reason he started it was as a millennial, as in his quarter, well, I'm not sure that he's a millennial, let me rephrase that. He was having a quarter life crisis, recognized that. And I'd love to talk with this man, and I'm going to reach out to him. He grew up Catholic in the South, very traditional, went to a prep school, the Southern values, do the right thing, be a gentleman, all of that stuff, but he couldn't conform to accept all he was told as fact. So he challenged the status quo a little bit and doubted his religious teachings and refused to participate in the mainstream stuff. But with that, he developed this theory of postmodern integral theory, which is having a healthy skepticism towards the traditional world views in order to transcend limited thinking and achieve your greater mindfulness, which sounds all woo-woo and magic wand, but when you look at it, he has this incredible website, unconventionallifeshow.com, and it's about how to beat the quarter life crisis and uncover your life purpose. It's a wealth of information and resources and videos and podcasts. Great resource. But he lists 5 steps you can take to figure this out, to work through this crisis. And he said, the first thing you can do is step up and create things you want to see in the world. So instead of when we're depressed, when we're anxious, and this has nothing to do with being a millennial, this has to do with being a human on the planet. If you're in that hole, it's so hard to see the light. And his first step, he said, create what you want in the world. If you love art, then do art. And it doesn't have to be your incredible passion it doesn't have to be, that's what I do for a living, but you still have to do it. Do you agree with that? Like with your writing is a good example. You would
100%.
write even if it wasn't for publication, you still would write because it gives you such peace and solace.
Right. I think that's a great suggestion. No matter what it is that you want to do it, even if you don't get paid for it, because it'll help connect you back to source and to who you are.
And then he said, stop trying to please everyone else, which goes into that competitive stuff of what we talked about a few minutes ago of, oh, my friends are getting married, or my friend went through that college program I wish I had, and look what their job is now and I don't have it. Or, this person has their own house. Why am I still living with my mother? And that comparison stuff that can leave us trying to please other people. Or as I mentioned earlier, the woman that she's in a college program that is practical and grounded in what her family would like, and she's in a situation where that doesn't really resonate for her, but she's going to complete it so that she has that to, just so that she has the piece of paper always to fall back with, which I think is a good idea. I'm not negating that at all. But that's a hard skill as an empath, to not want to please everyone else and make it okay. And to say, how
I
the hell
think
do I
so
put
too.
myself on the list?
But I think that's why I think just awareness is so key to digging yourself out of a quarter life crisis. Because if you are aware that you are an empath and you're aware that you want something more for your life, that's the first step towards creating it and realizing, like for me, the biggest thing that helped me was realizing I am different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I am different. I'm not the type that needs to check off all the boxes and compete and compare. And being different is okay.
Right. And that's a really, really hard skill, especially for empaths.
It is. It is. And if I could also just say before you read the next step,
Yeah.
watching TV, I think, is one of the worst things kids can do in terms of comparing themselves. I
Right.
look at these TV shows, reality shows, sitcoms, whatever they are, and the homes they're living in and the lifestyles they lead are so unrealistic for the jobs they have.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, really, it bothers me. If you look at the old shows, like, you know, Dick Van Dyke, he was a writer for The Tonight Show. That's a big paying job.
Mm-hmm.
And they lived in a 3-bedroom ranch.
Right.
I grew up watching Bewitched. He was, you know, the number 2 ad guy, like Mad Men, working in New York City, living in Connecticut, and they lived in a very normal house. You know, Who's the Boss? Remember that show? She was,
Yeah.
you know, the CEO of a company, and they had a nice home, but it's not like what you see on TV today. And, you know, I have a friend who's a realtor in Atlanta, and I happen to know that a lot of those reality shows, they rent those houses for the people, the characters who play in these. They can't actually afford those homes. And so I feel like young kids are getting out of school and they're watching these shows and they're thinking, well, they're doing it. The hell's wrong with me? And it's not. They're not. It's so much of it is a lie. And so many people are living beyond their means and just adding debt to debt upon debt just to keep up with the Joneses.
Right. And it also pressures to get that job that makes more money, and money is energy, and that's a story for a different day, but to make it the whole focus and not to follow your heart, or to feel like you have to go in a certain direction because it will make a certain income, even though you might be miserable and it'll suck the soul out of you. That's, I think, for this generation, incredibly difficult because they have been so bombarded with fame, fortune, wealth is the number one ticket you want to go for.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
but
Have you ever seen the movie Sabrina with Harrison Ford and
yes,
Greg Kinnear?
yes, it's a nice movie.
I love the woman who plays the character Sabrina. Her dad is the chauffeur for the wealthy family with Harrison Ford and Greg Kinnear. And he chose that career just so he could read.
Yes.
Reading was his passion. And there's a scene in the movie where he tells Sabrina, you know, to just follow your heart, to do what you love. And he said, you know, look at me. All I want to do is sit and read a good book. And so I chose this career. And I thought, wow, you know, there's something really cool about that.
And it fits those first two steps too. He created what he wanted to see in the world. He's stopped trying to please others, and he's living the life he wants to live without worrying about. And that's a very lucrative career. There was something else. Someone who became a multimillionaire because they were the chauffeur and they listened to the stock tips in the back of the car and
Oh,
invested.
yeah.
What was
Yes.
that from?
I don't remember, but I know that's ringing a bell. Yeah, and they had all this money and no one knew. Yeah, you never know. You've got to follow your bliss. All right, go ahead. What's the next step?
One that we both love and cherish. Listen to your inner voice. But the quotation from this man was, "You need to be listening for what's whispering to you and what tingles the heart." And I loved that line. I thought that was
Oh, I do
so
too.
perfect because it's it's unique. It's unique to all of us what brings us joy. And, it may be that I think that the pressure of you have to come up with the best or you want to be a multimillionaire, you need that one idea, you need this one thing. That's not what it's about. If you're an empath or anyone else on the planet, it's about making the most of your time here and what brings you joy and can also support you, because I'm also very much a realist of, you may love to knit doilies. Not a whole lot of people put doilies out anymore. Actually, you tat doilies. You wouldn't, or you'd crochet them. You wouldn't knit them. But anyway, um, his fourth thing was uncover your identity by trying new things, and that goes back to what you said about people being micromanaged and thinking, okay, well, I was a baseball star, or I was a top musician, or I was number one in my class. That's my definition of who I am. You may find out that if you're a rock climber, that gives you such a rush that it opens up all this creativity in you, or you want to go whitewater rafting, or you want to be in a play in your local community theater, or you want to submit an article, or it doesn't matter. That's the thing. It's about trying something new outside your comfort zone, which is scary, but also allows you to experiment a little bit and maybe find something that truly opens new doors for you that you may not even realize are there.
I agree. And I'd like to add a sixth step, if
Yes,
I could
please.
be so bold. Find your tribe.
Yes.
I really think for empaths in particular, it's really important that you find like-minded people, and you probably won't often find them at your job.
No.
Which is why I think it's crucial to do what he says in step 5, because if you try things that are outside of your comfort zone, that might be where you meet your people that are going to help you feel connected, just to feel this sense of, these are my people, these are the people who understand me, who get me. And that might be taking a yoga class, taking a meditation class, going to a crystal workshop. It might be, just joining your local community theater, like you said. But all of those things are going to help you build your new community that's outside of the structure of school or sports.
And if you're working in a job, and we need to have an energy exchange to pay for where we live, what we eat, what the cars we drive, you have to do something. Even I believe that even if you're in a very comfortable financial situation, then you may look at this as, I need to volunteer, I need to give back, I need to be a part of things. But for those of us and those of you and the millennials who are thinking, if you look at your boss and you think, oh my God, I don't want to be that person in 10 years, and your stomach flips, maybe starting a little side hustle of what you love and building that up so that you can, because my gut feeling, I think we have an amazing, amazing group of entrepreneurs on the planet right now. These millennials are going to kick ass with starting creative, helpful, nurturing businesses that not only align with their truth and energy, but also help heal the planet. And things are shifting, and it's very exciting. But to do that, you have to step out of the box and say, I'm going to be okay. I can make it.
I read this cool article that said the millennials, more than any other generation, are into conspiracy theories. And I love a good conspiracy theory. So I clicked on the article. And the writer was saying that this is actually a really good thing that the younger generation are all into these conspiracy ideas, because these are the people who are going to lead our country. These are the people who are going to be elected to local, state, and national office, who are going to run for judge and all sorts of other things that are going to impact our lives. And if you believe in conspiracy theories, it shows that you are interested in two things: getting to the truth and keeping an open mind. And those are two things that excellent leaders need.
Wow.
Isn't that a neat little connection?
It is. It's a very neat connection, but it also goes along with everything that we're saying. There's so much pressure, but this is new energy coming in, and it goes with what's going on energetically. All of the stuff that's been building up to release the past, step away. It's who you've been, not who you are now. It's all starting to move forward. And yes, people will say it's always darkest before the dawn, and things are quite tumultuous in the world right now. There's no other way to look at that. But it's also a catalyst for change, and it's a catalyst for healing and for truly becoming who we came here to be. And you
Right.
nailed it with the like-minded people thing. Even if it's someone, you connect through an online group, or you I almost said you get a pen pal. Does anyone even have pen pals anymore?
My kids, my daughter's school, they're doing a pen pal program with another school and on the other side of the country. So I think schools still do it.
Okay. But I think that, remember Ashley Asti, who we had on the show? She's a
Mm-hmm.
really big proponent of writing to people who are incarcerated to give them that link to the outs, that healing link. People need connection. What I'm saying is, if you're in a situation, or maybe you're in a job where you can't be highly sensitive, or you're in a community where it's abrasive, whatever it might be, there are ways to connect with people and find your group.
Yeah, and live your passion. When I was in my 20s, okay, here's something really fun. If you guys are in your 20s and you're listening to this, ask anyone over 40, what did you do for a living in your 20s? Because you will get the most hilarious answers. I mean, I remember I was at a teacher party and we were talking about the jobs we took while we were waiting to get a teaching job. And one of my friends, her job was to glue the bow on bras at a factory. Another one of my friends had to sew Halloween dog costumes. I mean, we all had the most ridiculous jobs. My job, I worked at a pharmaceutical company. I was the administrative assistant.
Oh,
I mean,
that's
I'm impressed.
important.
Yeah, so it's very important. But here's two things I want to say from that job and what I learned is to always be who you are. My job was to take these giant reams of scientific research reports and fax them.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was sitting in the fax room faxing them, channeling Jane Fonda from 9 to 5, I would read them. And, these are all doctors that were working at this pharmaceutical company. So they're very, very smart men and women. But they made a lot of grammar mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I might not have known a lot about pharmaceuticals or medicine or faxing, but I knew my grammar. And so I would go to my boss, Dr. Strayer, and I would say, hey, there's a typo here and there's a misplaced comma there. But it got me noticed and I got a pay raise from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they started sending me everything to proofread. And while I'm working that job, bored out of my ever-loving mind, I thought, okay, Samantha, what do you really want to do? And I was like, well, I really want to write. So I love history. So I came up with this idea of taking current events that were going on in the news and comparing it to historical events. And I tried to make it fun. Like there was this news story back then about how makeup wasn't organic and it was harming our skin.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote an article about that, and then I compared it to Queen Elizabeth I. When she died, Denise, they had to actually cut the makeup off her face because she would just powder it every day and it just hardened. So anyway, I wrote this little fun article about that, and I sent it off to 3 magazines. I wrote 3 articles, sent it to 3 magazines, and one of them took it, and I had my own column.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was really fun. I did it for like 5 years until I got on full time at the community college. So I think it's important to kind of hustle in your 20s too and find ways. Like nobody called me up and said, hey, we heard that you love history and current events. Would you like to, I created that. And I don't mean to sound like, oh, I created that, but I just mean it as an example of if you want to do something, sometimes you have to put it out there. Steve Jobs is famous for saying, people don't know what they want until you show it to them.
The expression that I used with my sons was, there was a situation with my older son years ago, and I was kind of in a weird, and I said, you're just not hungry enough. And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, if you're hungry, you'll go after it. If you really want this, you'll find a way. You'll make it work. You'll work your ass off. You'll look for options, or you'll say, this isn't worth, I'm not hungry enough for it. And I think that that's an interesting way, similar to, you've built a very successful business because you took the steps and you worked hard. You didn't just magically become the crystal chick and become a renowned medium and all of those other things. That took a lot of work to get where you are right now.
Right, and same with you, but it was rooted in following our passion, always
Yes.
following our passion.
Yes, and creating what we want to see in the world, wanting to find like-minded people, wanting to raise the vibration. And I think that is so, so damn important for especially millennials. And I hope this is coming up how much passion and compassion I have for this age group, and not because my sons are in this age group, but also because it's different. It's so different. And we need to move things in a new direction. And interesting, when you do think about the things you do in your 20s, I mean, I have always, I waitressed, I bartended, I did all of those things for years on the side to support my teaching income, but also before I did that, but group homes, nursing homes, state institutions, all of the things, it's always been about people who needed more, people who were vulnerable. That's been the whole premise of my life's work has been, and I wrote something about this years ago, that the throwaway people that nobody wants to deal with, the people that are locked up or put away, and why would that's been my life. And again, not like, oh, look at me, but that's just, I think as empaths, a lot of us fall into these roles of taking care of other people that can't take care of themselves. And that may or may not be your passion, but also make sure, excuse me, you take care of yourself in that time frame, because those are a lot of the jobs that are available for millennials right now are, working as if you're as a CNA, as a teacher, as a caretaker, that's where we are. And sadly, as our population ages, that's going to be a huge, huge field of work of taking care of the elderly, which I think anyone who can do geriatrics is blessed and gifted. I truly, truly do.
And even though we're saying like, oh, the economy makes it so difficult for millennials to do anything and, want stuff, I do want to also emphasize that this can be one of the best decades of your life. It's the only time in my life that I was truly free, really. Because as a kid, you're under your parents' thumb. Then you become, if you choose to become a parent, you're under your kid's thumb whether you like it or not.
Right.
There's no freedom to just travel or change jobs, or everything has to have the consideration of your children, which is my choice and my blessing. I'm grateful to do it. But that time in your 20s where you're not answering to anybody except your boss, that's a gift. And I think people need to embrace that more for the short amount of time it is. I mean, really, I had 8 years between college and becoming a mom. And then it was off to the races. And I look back at those years and I think I wish I had traveled more. I wish I had been a little bit more lazy. Like I wish I had just been sugarless days more and just sat around and read books instead of always hustling like I did. But I think people need to realize that this quarter life crisis is a relatively short time, and while it does have its drawbacks and its challenges, it also has many wonderful gifts, blessings, and opportunities.
It's a great time to get your yayas out. It truly is.
Yeah.
It's a perfect time to live outside the box, to see things. And I do want to go back about, I feel like I went a little doom and gloom about finances and what you have to do to survive. Can we touch base just a tiny bit on money as energy? Because as empaths, as sensitives, I think that is, be realistic, but don't limit yourself to say, I can never be let's pick something right, a writer or a photographer, a creative, or I can't start my own business because I'll never make enough money. Bottom line, that's bullshit. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, because it goes back to, if you have that drive, if you have something, if you make it of service, but also get good at it, practice, do it on the side. If you absolutely love more than anything, being a photographer, then be a photographer and build your skill set. Get really so good at it that people want to pay you for your pictures.
Exactly. I think that's really, really important for people to hear. And I also think to look at money as this thing. You know, it doesn't have to, my dad used to always say to me, Samantha, why do I work? To make money. And why do we make money? To spend it. So let's spend it and have fun. That was my dad's attitude always.
It's a good attitude.
And he would always say, you know, the money just appears. He's like, he said, every time I need money, God somehow intervenes and I have enough.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for people to look back on, you know, times in their life when they didn't have money. Sometimes if you have that attitude of surrender and trust in the universe, it will just appear. And I think when we limit ourselves in small ways with money, it sends a message out to the universe that I don't deserve anymore.
Right.
I have a friend, we make about the same amount of money every year, and she always tends to have less than I do. And our expenses are pretty much the same, and she can't figure it out. And I'm not saying I'm rolling in it or anything, or I'm frivolous with my money or anything like that. But every time we went shopping, for example, before Christmas at the store, and all of their candles were on sale for $10. These are really nice name brand candles. And so we were like so excited. Teacher gifts, this is great. You know, put this in a little bag with a Starbucks card. You got your teacher gift done. And I found some fragrances of the candles that I liked for me. Mm-hmm. And I found her favorite fragrance. And I was like, you've got to get this candle. This is your favorite. And she's like, oh, that's so cool. And she put it in her little shopping cart. And then she put it out. And I said, why aren't you getting that? It's $10. And she's like, well, that's $10 I can put towards Christmas. And I totally understand that. I really do.
Right.
But I think it's those subtle things of not treating yourself that do send out that message of, I'm not worthy.
Right.
And I think whether you're in your 20s or your 40s or your 70s, I think it's important to treat yourself because it does send a message out. And I don't mean that in a frivolous, abandoned way.
But it
I
also,
just mean this little.
It's so, from someone who struggled financially for most of my life, from circumstances, from choices, from other people's choices, I don't want to make light at all about how heavy that is and how overwhelming and how stressful. So anyone that's listening that's thinking, I don't know how I'm going to pay my electric bill this month, or where's this money? And it does, it brings up that old stress in me when you're afraid. And yes, you can generate more, but sometimes it means getting really quiet with yourself and saying, what do I need to let go of, or what do I need to, what isn't a necessity in my life so that I can get out of this hole and move forward? Because there's always a way out. I'm the poster child for that. There is always a way out. And I don't mean that in a judgy way at all. I mean it because it's an amazing gift to buy the $10 candle and feel good about it and feel like, wow, I can do this and it's not going to take away from something else. So,
and I'm worthy of this treat, whatever it is. And look, I get it. I mean, when you've got car payments and student loans and daycare costs and all of that stuff weighing on you, $10 is $10 that you can spend towards all of that. I understand that. But I just think there are small ways that we can send the message out that we're ready to receive more because we deserve it, damn it. And I think it needs to be said with that swear word.
Yes, and not to, I'm not going to pay my electric bill because I deserve to go to this show instead. No.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about. Or I need this, this high-end item that because my best friend has, no. Totally different. But as far as generating, it's energy. Money is energy. Make it about wealth and abundance. Make it about prosperity. Be grateful. And we say this a lot, and I say this all the time. I am absolutely humbled and amazed how powerful that concept is of gratitude and abundance and wealth. It's phenomenal.
It really is. Denise, if you could summarize your 20s as an empath, what would you say was the greatest thing about being in your 20s and the most challenging thing?
Let's see. The most challenging was truly and being so highly sensitive and not knowing what to do with it. Trying to fit in a traditional world where people might have been very abrasive or dismissive of how sensitive I really was, of trying to hide my light, of being overwhelmed, of trying to relate to people who were coming from a very different place. I would say that was the most difficult thing, and it took me I shut down for quite a while. Some of the other things, though, that were absolutely fantastic was having that wanderlust to live all over the country, to travel, to, I've been back and forth and all around the country so many times that it gave me, I was so ready to stop and have my kids. I was ready to be a mom. I was ready to, and I had my first son in my late 20s, early 30s, my second son. So around 29, 30, I had my first son. But when I said get your yayas out, for some people, you may need that time to really just be free to make stupid choices, to end up somewhere and say, oh my God, what the hell am I going to do now? Because then when you do make the choice to move in a more traditional direction, you're ready for it. Other people, they're ready for that when they're 22 years old. I sure as hell wasn't. I was kind of a mess.
No. But you had a cool, didn't you live off the grid for a little bit in your 20s?
Yeah, we did. We lived in the Siskiyou Mountains in Southern Oregon. Completely off the grid. We had a generator, water, the whole thing. It was in a canyon in the southern part of Oregon. We lived, we were the only Caucasians right next to the Yaqui Reservation in Tucson. We lived on the edge of the Yaqui Reservation. We lived in the middle of Portland, Oregon, right off 23rd and Hawthorne. So there were so many different experiences and cultures and, that just allowed me to be more compassionate and to have a wider view of life than if I had just stayed where I am. But I do,
so
that
cool.
being said, I have always kind of envied people that have been content to stay where they grew up. Because to me, that's a different, it fascinates me, and it also gives you a sense of comfort and familiarity that is, for some folks, very grounding. It didn't fit for me. So how about you? What about your 20s?
I think the most challenging thing about my 20s is exactly what you said. I was always trying to check off the boxes and fit in, married, check, career, check, house, check, dog, check. And, every time I checked those boxes, it wasn't bringing the fulfillment I assumed it would. And that was scary and jarring. The movie Reality Bites, I don't know if you've seen that. That movie haunted me. It was with Winona Ryder, and anyway, it's about, not millennials, because it came out when I was in my 20s, but it's about kids coming out of school and being like, okay, I don't want to follow the path my parents followed, but there's no other path for me.
Right.
I have to make my own. And I remember I would watch that movie a lot, and I would think, yeah, I don't want to follow that path either, but I don't know what the hell other path there is.
Mm-hmm.
That was really scary. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I started to really embrace who I was, take all of the labels off of me, and realize that those boxes I was trying to check off, those weren't my boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And I do wish I had learned that in my 20s. My biggest regret is that I never lived alone. I really do regret that. I think everyone in their 20s should live alone.
I did,
and
yeah.
I didn't. I got married when I was 23.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I basically went from school to my husband's house.
Wow. At the time it fit.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was so crazy in love. I had no choice. I was like running down that aisle. I mean, no one could have talked me out of that. But I do look back. I look at my friends. I mean, I have so many friends who owned their own house before they got married. you know, who really did the adult thing. So I didn't really feel like an adult. I mean, my husband had his own house. Like, I moved into his house.
Right.
It wasn't even like, you know what I mean? So I do wish that I had had more of that independence in my 20s. And I think, especially for women listening to this that are young, I really recommend, if you can, to live on your own before you dive into the fullness of adulthood. I do wish I had traveled more. I did travel, but not as much as I wanted to. And I wish I had done that. I was always saving up for something. I was always saving up for a new car, saving up for a house. And I'm glad I did that, but I wish I had traveled more. The best thing about being in my 20s is, as I said before, the freedom to just do whatever the hell I wanted. And I do miss that. I do. And I know I'll have it again, and I look forward to that. It'll be bittersweet, but I do relish those times of just being able to stay up as late as I want, the weekend, sleeping in, and not having to get up to take someone somewhere or do whatever. Not owning a house in my early 20s, not waking up and going, I got to mow the lawn, I got to trim the bushes, I got to, whatever. There's just that freedom. I think that's one of the best things. The other thing I think is wonderful about being in your 20s is you're not defined by anything. You're not yet defined by the job, because you don't have a career right away. Most people, I think statistics show, have 8 jobs before they find their career.
Wow.
And while I think that can be stressful, I also think there's some freedom there where you're not defined by your job, by your school, by your major, by your parents, by a partner, by a spouse. I think that's very, very freeing. And you really do get to discover who you are when you're completely on your own.
As you were speaking, I had a flash of a young woman that graduated from the high school that I taught at, and she did the very traditional path. She got through high school. She went to teaching college. She was working as an assistant in the school so that she could get a teaching job. And she must have been 23, 22, 23, 20, right in that range. And she said, okay, I have to buy my house. I have to get a car with a payment. And she was so blinders focused. And I said, is this really what you want to do? She says, oh yes, I'm really excited. And I have to, again, it goes back to looking through that window at somebody else's world. For her, that was just exactly what she wanted to be doing. Was she an empath? Probably not, but that's okay. I think honoring your light and your path, if you want that structure, if you want that house, but I agree with you, that time to figure out who the hell you are on the planet and what makes you you is such a beautiful gift. And not, as I'm going to just say it again, because I always do, 18 to 24, you're not the same person at the end of that ride that you started it with.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And that is okay. And I think, too, another regret I have is that I didn't embrace my abilities. And I do hope anyone listening to this who's thinking, maybe I'm empathic, but I don't know if I'm intuitive. I do wish I had embraced it in my 20s rather than waiting till my early 30s. I think it would have been much easier to accept myself instead of trying to fit in. Fitting in is really such a waste of time.
And
it's a waste of time.
It is.
I just thought of this, fitting in. It means fitting into a box. That's so confining. That phrase, fitting in.
It is. So when you said you'll get a chance to do this again, that leads into when we do the show on midlife crisis and empaths, because there's so many correlations between quarter life and midlife. And my gut feeling is if you do your work at quarter life, it makes midlife a lot easier to get through.
I agree. And I think midlife, we'll talk about it on another show, I think it has the same but different amount of challenges and blessings.
Yes, because you're going through.
I look forward to talking about that.
Don't you think it's interesting that, millennials, this quarter life crisis, they say it's from mid-20s to early 30s, but generally, give or take right around 24, 25, 26, right in that little range is the real pocket of it.
Yeah,
so you get through that, and then you go into your Saturn return. Midlife crisis,
Right.
they gave this broad number, and I'm not buying it, but they said 45 to 64. I think that that's just a little too wide because usually it's late 40s, early 50s, mid 50s. People really start to, I would say maybe early mid 40s for some folks to mid 50s for some folks. Do you feel like that's a
Yeah.
reasonable range?
Yeah. No, I do.
But
I
then
think
at the end of
that's
that,
more
you
accurate.
also go into a Saturn return. So I think that's interesting, the
Right.
timing with those.
I
Oh,
never thought of that. The first Saturn return is 29, and then the second one is 59.
well,
Is that
I
right?
think it's anything from it's late 20s, isn't it? Like 27 to 29 and 57 to 59.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a span. But then
Got
I'm
it.
thinking, okay, if you have another Saturn return in your, what is it, your late 80s? Yeah, because it's 30-year
Mhm.
cycles. Does that mean you have to have another midlife crisis, or what would you have in your mid?
Oh my gosh, are we going to have to do a show on the octocrisis? I'm not prepared.
I think at that point people just don't give a shit, and they're like, you know what, I'm here and I'm
Yeah,
happy and I've done my work.
exactly.
So anyway, we
Well,
will
we
do
hope
a show
we've
on midlife
given,
as well.
yes, we will do that soon, and we'd love to hear any stories or questions you have about the quarter life or midlife crisis, or if you want to share your story of how you got out of your quarter life or midlife crisis, you can email it to us, enlightenedempaths@gmail.com, or you can message us on Facebook. We are there under Enlightened Empaths. I'm also on Instagram under Chakra Chick. If you want to message me there, you can as well. Are you on Instagram, Denise?
I'm not. Do you think I should be?
Okay. It's kind of
People have,
fun. I like it.
people have been pushing me for the Instagram. Why aren't you on there, Denise? I think I'm doing well to
It's
be as
it
honest as I
has a
am.
gentler energy than Facebook.
Okay, well
Yeah.
maybe I'll check it out.
So anyway, so we've got a lot of great guests and shows coming up. We're going to be doing our September community connections as well. So please send us any questions you have that you want us to discuss on that show. Our daytime mediumship webinar is really filling up, and I'm so excited because I've never done a daytime webinar. I didn't think it would go over. And Denise said, there's a lot of people who work from home or are retired and they have time during the day. Let's try it. And wow, we've got a lot of people. That starts this Friday, August 31st. So if you want to sign up for that, we are meeting for 4 weeks starting this Friday from noon to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. On September 20th, Denise and I start our evening mediumship webinar. That will meet for 4 Thursdays starting September 20th from 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. And we really love doing this webinar. We've gotten such great feedback and such wonderful interest. Each week you're partnered with someone new from the class and given exercises where you can really start to strengthen your intuition and see if you do have mediumship ability, and you do it in a safe, inclusive, and supportive community of like-minded people. And you also get lots of great handouts and meditations and tips and suggestions from us through email and then on the webinar, which we do through Zoom, which is really cool because then you can log in and connect with us either on your phone or your computer. So we hope you join us for one of those webinars. In the meantime, we hope you have a wonderful, happy week, whether you are 20, 40, or 85 and 105. We hope you have a wonderful week. Don't forget to show up, do great work, and share your light. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.